All right, Nuggets fans, welcome into Pickaxe and Roll, brought to you by our good friends over at SCL Mortgage. I am your host, Ryan Blackburn, at NBA Blackburn on Twitter, part of the Mile High Sports Podcast Network, and I am here. I am certainly not fully rested. I don't know if you can tell, but from each of these, like as we get later into the season, I look like more and more trash, just in general. Need to start like investing in like a face cream or something like that, because holy cow, this season is wearing on your boy. Doing a lot, trying to put out good content for everybody, and it's just been an exhausting year, as I'm sure a lot of people understand and appreciate. Michael Malone and Calvin Booth fired yesterday. If you're here, you definitely know about that already. The Nuggets are going to try to adjust over the course of these next few weeks, few days, and we'll see how well they do. But just looking at the standings and looking how everything is evolving over the course of just even 24 hours, you never know what's going to actually happen in the NBA. And I think that it's more important to probably talk about this from the macro perspective, though we will talk about the next three games and what they mean for the Nuggets from both like an on-court and off-court standpoint. We'll get into it all. Really appreciate it if you're stopping by. Thank you for tuning into the show. Really quickly, this podcast, as you know, it's brought to you by the good folks over at SCL Mortgage, who have been a very strong supporter for Mile High Sports over the course of these past few weeks, few months. You're looking for a mortgage company that you can actually trust. So many out there you're not really sure about. We've done the work. SCL Mortgage, they're going to be great for you. They have hundreds of happy customers, a 5-star reputation. If you're interested in a mortgage loan but are self-employed, if you need a new home and you need a down payment, if you need a second mortgage, whatever you need, SCL Mortgage has got you, helping hundreds of people just like you achieve their dreams. Call SCL Mortgage. Call 303-790-2222 or visit myspecialmortgage.com. Again, that's 303-790-2222. All right. Let's get into this thing. Michael Malone, Calvin Booth, notably pretty disparate over the course of these past 3 years with the organization. When Calvin first took over, you knew it was going to be his way. You knew he had very strong takes. He had very strong beliefs in how best to help the roster. And for that first year, it was pretty clear that he and Michael Malone, they got on, but it wasn't perfect during that stretch. Calvin had to say goodbye to a variety of people, both on the roster and just like trying to turn Denver into what he thought was the best possible situation for Denver to win a title. And they did. And that reaffirmed not only Calvin's belief that he was doing the right thing and in his plan and his motives, and he was a smart guy, but also Michael Malone in his ability to coach, finally got a healthy roster all the way through the playoffs. Great opportunity. And it just felt like both of those guys, they knew how valuable they were to the organization and knew how valuable they were to helping turn this thing into a championship team. Never mind. Everybody believes and knows that Nikola Jokic is the most important factor in all of this. Nobody is disputing that. But I think Michael Malone deserves some credit. I think Calvin Booth deserves some credit, especially for that first year. And unfortunately, what it ultimately turned into was them both believing that they knew best for the organization and actively kind of working against each other at points because they thought the other person was sabotaging. That's not it's not hyperbole. I wrote a piece in Mile High Sports that you should definitely check out. I posted yesterday afternoon, evening. There's a lot of stories behind the scenes about the way that Calvin Booth, the way that Michael Malone, operated on a consistent basis and didn't necessarily approach things from the right perspective. I have more stories about Calvin Booth from what I've heard because I think that he was more of a central figure here. But Michael Malone wasn't innocent in all of this. He fought Calvin at every turn, and he thought that Calvin was actively working against him, and Calvin thought that Michael Malone was actively working against him over the course of these last 2 years, especially. Um, there's a variety of things that happened. Um, After the championship in 2023 is probably where we should pick up. KCP, Bruce Brown, Jeff Green, all essential for Denver in terms of what they were able to do. But part of the reason why Calvin Booth drafted Peyton Watson, Christian Brown, was so that they could eventually take over for the older veterans. That was pretty reasonable. It's a pretty reasonable take to have. Everybody knew that Bruce Brown, that if he was successful, was only going to be there for 1 year because they couldn't offer him more. And so I thought, honestly, that Calvin did a reasonable job with Jeff Green, or not with Jeff Green, with Justin Holiday, getting him in the building. But getting Reggie Jackson, kind of that was a promise that they had made. It was, I think, somebody that Michael Malone and Calvin Booth both battled on, especially because Jalen Pickett was somebody that they both battled on. When Jalen Pickett was brought into the organization, I think there were a variety of folks around the organization that thought it was just because he was a Penn State guy, that he wasn't actually there to really seriously play. And for those that know, Penn State is Calvin Booth's alma mater. And so you watch Jalen Pickett, and I think everybody in that first year, including Michael Malone, didn't really believe in it. Jalen really struggled initially, both in the first season and then especially in that next summer league. And I think he was caught in between, of course, these two polar opposite forces, one wanting him to play even through the mistakes in order to get better, the other not believing that he should play, that he shouldn't have been playing in the first place, he shouldn't have been drafted in the first place. And it was just a very awkward situation for everybody to be a part of, for everybody to have to deal with. The Nuggets didn't have to deal with as many young guys during that stretch. In the 2022-23 season, they only had 4 rookie contract guys on the roster, and Christian Brown, Peyton Watson, Zeke Naji, who still hasn't worked out, and Bones Highland, who they traded during the middle of the year. And that was a good thing that they did. They needed to be able to disconnect from Bones because Bones wasn't helping them win a championship. But now they have 6. They have 6 guys, including the same Christian Brown and Peyton Watson. Zeke Naji is now a 5th-year player, but he's kind of still a guy that you could effectively say is on a rookie contract, not from a money standpoint, but in terms of how Michael Malone uses him and values him. Used him. Oh my God, I'm going to have to start using past tense. Holy cow. But then you've also got Julian Strother, Jalen Pickett, Hunter Tyson, and Deron Holmes, who make up the rest of the rookie contracts. Deron Holmes, not somebody that they can't, that is a part of this, but he is also somebody that Calvin went above and beyond to go get. And part of that process, trading 3 second-round picks in order to move up 6 spots. If you had just let it lie, you might have been without telegraphing exactly who you wanted to everybody under the sun, you might have been able to save those picks. And then you trade Reggie Jackson along with 3 second-round picks as well in order to get out from under a mistake that you made and compounding it. And so that's one of the reasons why Denver doesn't have any assets. It's because Calvin has really, he did really opt into everything with this current group, with the young players, building upon them. And he put Denver, the organization, caught between a rock and a hard place because he took all of those assets and shredded them over the course of these last 3 years, basically saying, all right, this is the team. You're going to have to play the young guys because this is where all of our assets went. And Michael Malone didn't do that, at least not to the degree that he probably should have. He has played Christian Brown. He has played Peyton Watson. There's no question about that. And to his own credit, or like say, he actually has also played Julian Strawther, and Julian just hasn't like been healthy enough, precise enough to really justify playoff consideration, I would say. And there's just a lot. There's a lot that's gone on. I also reported in that article the Jamal Murray contract situation, which got a little bit of pushback from members of the front office today in terms of exactly how it happened. But I stand by what I reported, that effectively Calvin Booth was given responsibility to get Jamal Murray signed for his contract. But in the process of that, he also explored trade possibilities and trying to evaluate him. And then those went down the pipeline so far. Usually, like, you'll see guys like, okay, how should we value this player? You're trying to see what other people would want. But he actually took a couple proposals to Josh Kroenke. And in terms of, all right, this is what we could get for Jamal if we didn't want to sign him to this contract. And Josh was like, that's not a lot. Just sign him to the contract instead. Like, we're going to keep him. And so Jamal, like, has been pretty mad. Like, he was mad about the way the Nuggets handled his contract, the way they handled his extension talks this summer. I got in trouble at one point with Jamal because of how they handled his contract talks this past summer. And yeah, that was a thing that kind of pulled the team apart a little bit. I will say Calvin did a fantastic job in negotiating the Aaron Gordon extension, making sure that was correct. And to his credit, he has kept the core together for what was a championship team without like making a rash decision. And part of that, he has also attempted to trade Michael Porter at times. But Josh Kroenke said no a couple times, including for Zach LaVine, for what it's worth. My interest in Zach LaVine wasn't exactly like out of thin air, for what it's worth. But Denver decided to keep their group together. And the hope was that the young guys and the energy that they would provide would allow the starters and some of those guys to take a back seat a little bit and on the defensive perspective, but they weren't really fully able to do that. Christian Brown wasn't a one size fits all, everything awesome defender. And he has turned out actually to be a great offensive player for Denver, just one that doesn't really shoot that many threes. And that has helped Denver in some ways, but the Nuggets needed defense. They needed somebody that was just a lockdown defender to kind of make up for some of the stuff that they have lacked. And between Peyton Watson seeking a new contract, Christian Brown not necessarily seeking a new contract, but taking advantage of this opportunity and figuring out how to score, they're in a really tough place. They're in a really tough place with the current group and trying to figure out where they go from here. Perhaps just removing some of the Cold War stuff between Malone and Booth and just excising it from the organization is the right call, and Denver can get back on track in everything that they are trying to accomplish. But I don't know. I don't know if that is perfectly reasonable to think. I think that with where they are, it doesn't look like they're winning a championship anytime soon. And not having enough defense, not having a connected enough roster, not having a group that you feel too strongly in is a pretty tough story. Um, Denny Crane asks, Ryan, is the story about Malone and stacking up Pickett in 5v5 true? I believe it is true. I don't have it confirmed to me by people within the organization, but I also did hear some stories from folks around the media that have said something similar. Yes. I didn't write about it for that reason, but because it's not my story to tell. But yeah, just a lot of things have gone wrong for Denver, and the last straw for Calvin really was turning his nose up at a contract extension talk with Denver. The Nuggets do not pay their executives that much, and Calvin thought, as and rightly or wrongly, that winning a championship would get him a larger contract than he actually got in terms of an offer. And he turned his nose up at it, and he was not that he was not that pleased. And from what I've heard, um, he told everybody that he was not very pleased. And as he closed himself off more and more to making decisions and being the only guy that was allowed to make decisions for the team and for the organization, the only thing that people ever heard from him was that he was unhappy with his contract situation. And that's not a healthy place to be. Not a healthy place to be as an organization at all. So, look, things were not collaborative by the end of it. The team was not together by the end of it. The players have been caught in the middle, and the hope is that you remove these elements and you get everybody back on track. You can see what David Adelman is going to do and see if that changes anything. I don't know if it will, but what I do know is that this was an untenable situation that the Nuggets needed to change. And Stan Kroenke decided, we're going to change it sooner than later. And I understand why they did it. All right, let's take a break. When we come back, we are going to discuss we're going to discuss the next 3 games. The Nuggets actually play basketball tonight, so we'll have to get in on that. We'll talk about the Kings game tonight, as well as what does Nikola Jokic actually want in all of this? I don't know if I have the answers, but I'm certainly going to ask the question. We'll be right back here on Pickaxe and Roll. All right, we are back. Pickaxe and Roll, Ryan Blackburn here. Thank you so much for tuning into the show. Appreciate the love and support, folks. If you could, it would be awesome if you could hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, especially if you are new. Would love to see you stick around. I don't do a whole bunch of in-depth reporting like this, but when you are, and when I say in-depth reporting, I mean like the investigative journalism that I think a lot of people assume us reporters are all doing, where we've got the notepad outs, the we're using the recorder and just sneaking around Ball Arena. No, it's not what we're doing, but you just get told things over the course of 3 years, and especially over the course of these last few weeks, a lot more stuff came out, and people, I think, could see the writing on the wall and that things were not in a great place. So here's hoping that the Nuggets can figure some stuff out, can get back on track, and the organization can sort of pull themselves together a little bit, because it should be about the basketball by the end of the day. And unfortunately, for much of this, it just wasn't really about the basketball. So let's get into this. Okay, great. This guy is getting banned. All right. The next 3 games, the Nuggets play tonight at Sacramento. Zach LaVine has scored 40-plus points in a couple straight games, and I am very curious to see how Denver defends him, the kind of effort that they provide. They've won versus Sacramento pretty consistently over the course of this past year, and they won in this last matchup. That was a game where I remember being at that game. Zach LaVine took like 12 shots, and DeMar DeRozan took like 35. And he was great. He was pretty impressive. In that, like, he took 35 shots. It was wild to be there and to see somebody like Zach LaVine, as talented as he was, just kind of, yeah, here you go, DeMar. Like, you've got it. I don't agree with much of what the Kings have done over the course of it. It's going to be interesting to see whether Denver can guard, whether they choose to guard, whether they want to guard in that situation. I don't know what it's ultimately going to look like against Sacramento, but if everybody is relatively healthy, I don't think Jamal is going to play, but I actually don't know what the injury report says about him. I assume it says that he's questionable, but I just sort of have serious doubt that he is going to play. Let's pull it up. In all the chaos yesterday, I didn't even think to check the injury report. Jamal Murray is doubtful. Okay. Doubtful. Malik Monk is out. Keegan Murray is questionable. Jake LaRavia is out. That's actually funny. Both of those guys in the matchup that we watched, I want to say 2 months ago, basically Domantas Sabonis was out, and they decided to switch Keegan Murray and Jake LaRavia onto Jokic and keep Jonas Valanciunas out of matchups with Jokic as much as possible. And it bothered Jokic. It bothered the Nuggets. They didn't necessarily know how to handle it that well. And it's fascinating to think about it. At this point, how Denver handles those kinds of matchups is the least of their worries as an organization. But I'm sure that Jokic will be great. I'm sure that everybody will have a little bit more of a pep in their step. That's at least the messaging that is coming out from within the organization, that they expect everybody to be pretty intense. They expect everybody to provide, wow, it's crazy that they're closing out now. Crazy that they're running in transition, getting back in transition. Crazy that they're making the detail plays all of a sudden. Perhaps the weight being lifted will help things go. Perhaps they'll listen to David Adelman a little bit more than they were listening to Michael Malone. Because let's face it, they were blocking out Malone. They weren't really listening to him, not really respecting the messaging that was being provided. And so maybe over these next 3 games, David Adelman kind of gets them into a good place where they're doing the right things. He's saying the right things, and they are pulling the same direction for once. That would be a hopeful, wishful thinking. Whether it actually happens remains to be seen. After the Wednesday game tonight, they come back home. They play versus the Memphis Grizzlies on Friday, and then they go at Houston on Sunday in the final game. The Lakers lost on last night in what was a pretty funny ultimate loss for them. I'm not sure. Are the Rockets clinched? Are they locked into the 2 seed at this point? I think they might be. Yeah. So the Rockets are at 27 losses. The Lakers are at 31, and they each have 3 games left to go. So the Rockets are going to be the 2 seed. So that final game that the Nuggets play, the Rockets are not going to try. Like, they're not going to play anybody. I'd be shocked if they played anybody in that particular matchup. They don't want to show the Nuggets anything on film because they're a team that they could potentially see. So I could absolutely see Denver winning that game. I could see them winning the Sacramento game. The Memphis game on Friday, that's like both of those teams are tied in the wins and losses column right now at 47 and 32. It's funny looking at it. The Lakers are 48 and 31. The Clippers, Nuggets, Warriors, Grizzlies are all tied at 47 and 32, and the Minnesota Timberwolves are 46 and 33. So, going to be interesting to see how Denver handles any tiebreaker situations. Right now, they're currently the 5th seed in what is a 4-way tie between the Clippers, Nuggets, Warriors, Grizzlies. If Denver continues to win and they go 3-0 in this stretch, seems like they are guaranteed now to be the 5th seed, at least. But that's because they take their matters into their own hands at that point. But yeah, all of these games have some weight. It'll be interesting to see how Denver handles themselves. It's funny. This comment from Bobby: 0-4 versus the Wizards and the Bulls. Yeah, the Wizards is a criticism, to be clear. The Bulls are like the 9 seed in the Eastern Conference right now. Like they are not that bad. The Wizards are 17 and 62. The Bulls are now 36 and 43. They've won more than twice as many games. But yeah, like, should Denver have lost either of those games to the Bulls? Hell no. Hell no. They should not have done that. Yeah, those standings are going to keep shifting because everything is so tight, because everything is in a really uncomfortable situation right now. The only teams that are now locked are the Thunder at 1, the Rockets at 2, and the Kings are either going to be the 9 or the 10 seed. It looks like the Suns also 3 games behind the Dallas Mavericks with 3 games left to go. The Suns have lost 7 games in a row. The game that they had against the Warriors yesterday was I didn't get to comment on it, and like, how could anybody comment on it when you just fired your coach and your GM? But like, the Suns are in a way worse place than Denver, despite the fact that Denver is in a horrible place. Would you trade for Kevin Durant if you are a Nuggets fan right now? Would you want to trade for Kevin Durant? Would you trade one of Murray or Porter in order to do it? If you're trading Porter, you might have to trade Gordon as well in order to make it happen. I don't know. I don't think I would trade for Kevin Durant. The thought has crossed my mind on several occasions because everybody and their mother knows that KD is leaving the Suns. But I don't know, because everybody's talking about, like, hey, you want to get an all-star next to Jokic. If you do, there's one that's right there. But it takes a lot. There's a large byproduct between what would happen for those guys. And like, if you're trying to make sure that KD's, I'm not going to actively say that he's a bad culture guy, but you just look at the way that his teams have gone over the course of the past 7 years. The end of the Warriors run, the Nets being as toxic as they were, and then the Suns over the course of, like, from 2022-23 to now, they're just in a really tough place. So the upgrade on talent from Porter to KD is, I think, pretty high. From Murray to KD, I'm not sure it's that crazy. And people will think you're so biased for saying that. It's just about the way that Denver plays. And yet, maybe they'd be better. I don't know. But just kind of funny to think about. Okay, so Denver, like, look, they control their own destiny in these next 3 games. If they win out, they will be at least the 5 seed. Actually, can I even say that? Because there are certain, like, if one of those teams loses and you change the tiebreaker and it's Minnesota. No, because Minnesota's already down there. Memphis is down there. And then if Denver loses to Memphis, then that would change. Okay, so yes, if I can say this comfortably, if Denver goes 3-0, they are going to be at least the 5 seed. I don't know if that's good. Maybe they should try to be the 6. But trying to manipulate the standings at this stage, it's going to be really tough because everybody is tied, and if you lose one game, then you're probably dropping to the play-in. That's how I think Denver should feel about it. Because, by the way, if they lose one game and Minnesota wins out, then they are like tied in the standings with Minnesota, and Minnesota definitely has the tiebreaker there. So we will see what it looks like. Final thing here before we get going. I just wanted to pose this question. This is what's on the title of the thumbnail. What does Nikola Jokic want in Denver? Everybody and their mother is scared that, and like this is Nuggets fans that I'm talking about, is scared that Nikola Jokic could leave, is scared that he could request a trade. Misko Raznatovic, who is his agent, is over in Serbia. He came over, I want to say, and was there for the Minnesota game, the one where he put up 60, 10, and 10, and the Nuggets still managed to lose. Pretty scary. Pretty scary if the way that he like effectively put out the idea that Jokic's odds to be the next team. The Lakers were at the top of that, and then KK Partizan and then KK Joker. They were both on the odds for that. I think he was making a joke more than anything, Misko's Jokic's agent. But like, not a funny joke if you're the Nuggets joking about, hey, who would be the next team for Joker? Not great. So what does Jokic actually want? Does he want to be a Nugget? I think so. I think he would like to be with the same organization. But once you start changing up the personnel, once you start changing up like Tim Connolly leaving after 7 of his years, like I'll tell you guys straight up, Jokic was pretty disappointed that Tim left and went to Minnesota. So much so that like he would like him back. And I feel pretty comfortable saying that if he had Tim back, then I'd feel pretty comfortable if I was a Nuggets fan. But now you've got Jokic's only ever coach. And Denver has to do what they can to reaffirm to Jokic that they're doing everything, not just to make him happy, but to push the organization forward and to be an organization that is worthy of Joker staying for. And that's the rub, because it's not just about keeping Jokic happy. Like, the Nuggets have had Vlatko on the roster. They've had Dario Saric on the roster. Those guys are two of the guys that Jokic likes to confide in. And now, like, they're at this point trying to figure out, okay, how do you handle this going forward? How do you build the best possible roster for Jokic to say that he wants to be here? And it's going to be very interesting who they bring in. I don't think that they're going to have enough money or want to spend enough money to bring in a guy like Bob Myers. If I were a Nuggets fan, I would desperately want for the Nuggets to add Bob Myers as their GM, maybe president of basketball operations, whoever. He would be awesome in Denver for so many different reasons. He's been around at various points, and I think that they might explore it, but ultimately Bob Myers is going to cost a lot of money, and the Kroenkes do not want to spend a lot of money on a general manager. So probably not going to happen. Tim Connolly is probably out. He's probably going to re-up with Minnesota. I would expect him to be up with Minnesota. If he doesn't, then maybe he becomes an option. He would also cost a pretty penny. I think everybody would feel pretty good about having Tim back. You might quibble with that in terms of roster decisions, but there's nobody that's been better in Denver at establishing a culture and a group that is unified than Tim Connolly. And then after that, it's, does Jokic want to play with the current roster? And how many of the pieces on the current roster should actually be here? I think that there is a precedent for breaking up the core group. of Jokic, Murray, Porter, Gordon. Natalia is in the comments asking, you going to address the comments? So Kroenke was the reason Murray and Porter didn't get traded, Ryan? He's not the only reason, but like, yeah, he poo-pooed the Porter trades. He poo-pooed the Murray trades. Yes, that was a thing. And so at that time, Denver was retaining a core that won a championship together. And I don't blame them at all for that. I don't blame anybody for that. Because you owe it to the group to try to make it happen and to not be overly reactive. The way that things ended last year, there was an opportunity to react, but I honestly think that Denver did the right thing in running it back with those guys. Ultimately, they should have run it back with KCP as well. But even if they didn't, I was pretty argumentative that if you're not going to run it back with KCP, you better use the flexibility to add somebody else who's nearly just as good. And they never did that, ever. Yeah, so what does Jokic want? Who does he want to play with? I'm going to rank this. I believe he would love to play with Aaron Gordon. I think he would love to play with Christian Brown. I think he's okay playing with Murray. And I think he's okay playing with Porter. Peyton Watson, you're still trying to figure out whether he could be a part of things. A lot of this is going to be on, does Peyton get paid in the offseason? And does he stop thinking about the contract? And does he think more about what the team actually needs? Not just Peyton, but like everybody. Like everybody is as trying to. I'm saying that incorrect. I'm saying that poorly. But Peyton's got to worry about like who he is in this league as well. And I don't blame him for that in the slightest at all. But that's what happens when you've got a bunch of young guys who are establishing themselves and trying to make money in the NBA, trying to establish that they should be around and they should get a long-term contract. So Christian's going to get that. I think Peyton's going to get that, if not from the Nuggets, then from somebody else. And Denver has to identify what they need to do over the course of this offseason. It's going to be pretty stressful. But who knows? Maybe the Nuggets pull it out. Maybe they figure it out. And the unfortunate stuff that they've had to deal with over the course of these last few months, couple years, will make them better in the long term. I don't think I believe that. And it's why I've been as pessimistic as I've been. But you should leave the possibility open. Like, it's crazy what effort and intensity and attention to detail will do. And if you rediscover those things as the Nuggets, which they have not had any of it over the course of this year, if you can rediscover it with a new group, this is a group that won a championship. It's not that far off. It's really not. But the last little bit is extremely important. So we will see. We'll see how it handles. But folks, that is going to do it for this episode of Pickaxe and Roll, brought to you by our good friends over at SCL Mortgage. Everybody, thank you so much for tuning in. Got a big audience here, and I really appreciate you stopping by. Lots of stuff going on, and I am very curious to see how the Nuggets approach tonight, the next couple of games, and where they ultimately end up in the playoffs. Should be fun. I'm looking forward to it. Everybody, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button on the way out. Would really, really appreciate it. I will talk to you guys very soon.